Welcome to the Tamarind Learning Podcast, where host Dr. Kirby Ross-Plock speaks with experts on many topics relevant in the ultra-high net worth family wealth management space. Kirby is author of several books, including The Complete Family Office Handbook, and shares her expertise consulting with families and family offices. Kirby is also the founder of Tamarind Learning, an online wealth education platform that develops practical, foundational learning programs for beneficiaries to help them prepare for responsible stewardship of wealth.
Welcome to the Tamarind Learning Podcast. My name is Kirby Ross-Plock. I'm your host today, and today we're talking about ethical wills and legacy of values. So I'm so happy to have with me today Iris Wagner. She is the founder, president, and CEO of Memoirs Productions, and she's a longtime dear friend who has done some incredible work in the family wealth space to help families bridge continuity and to capture their values and their stories and their significant life events in a way that gives me goosebumps because she's just an amazing visionary in this space. And so a little bit more about Iris, when she was a young girl, she had a passion for connecting with others. And as a gift to her family, she would make homemade, like Hallmark type cards that just captured people and their spirit and everything about them. And that is just a great little tidbit about Iris and how she really understood the importance of deep human connection, feeling heard, being seen, being understood, and finding ways to connect really deeply with others. She translated this, into her passion for creating video ethical wills and high quality production films for individuals that helps to capture their life stories, lessons learned, and just really inspiring stories that move the needle transformative, the kind that make a next generation of a family or a community really deeply understand somebody's life, what their contribution was, what was important. So I'm thrilled to have Iris here today because she's even transformed herself in her practice recently as we've lived under these incredible, scary times of COVID. And not that she doesn't keep providing broadcast quality films to her clients, but she's also helped turn over a new leaf and kind of elicited the super Zoom ninjas of the world to realize that we can do this actually locally at home from our dining room tables, our home desks, and we can create some incredible pieces as well. So we'll get into that more. But with that, welcome, Iris.
Thank you so much, Kirby. I'm so thrilled to be here. And I want to just start off by saying a little story, perhaps, starting off. I just had a call a recent while ago, first thing in the morning, from a roughly 50-year-old daughter of a client that we filmed, who her father, who's now passed, was a reformed alcoholic, 27-year alcoholic, and he overcame and managed to run a very, very successful real estate business, family business. She called me in tears in the morning to say that at midnight the night before, she was heading to bed and she heard tears coming from her son's room. Her son, who was actually plagued with a cocaine addiction, 17 years old and starting with a cocaine addiction. And she just said that she cracked the door open a peep and he looked at her with tears in his eyes. In front of him on his screen was his grandpa telling him about how he got over alcoholism. And he looked at his mom and he just said, "Help me, please help me. I want to get over it like grandpa did." So that's why I'm in this business. That's why I do it, to get those kinds of experiences, those transformations within generations of families. It really is quite powerful.
Well, you're making me cry. I know that was hitting at your heartstrings as well. And I think that's what's so powerful. And maybe people don't understand, what exactly is an ethical will, and how do those moments that you just described, how do they factor in? I mean, an ethical will might sound formal and, at a distance, but what you just shared is so real, so palpable. So maybe you can help us, navigate the two.
Sure. In this case, the interesting part of the story is that there is a world of resources out there for this 17-year-old. He could have gone to numerous places, but instead he turned to family, his grandfather's story that was inspiring and was recorded. And of course, unfortunately, he could no longer communicate with the grandfather. But those kinds of values and stories that are communicated make up the parts of the ethical will. It just makes you think, where would this kid be?
Mm-hmm.
So it's never too early to start an ethical will. I have someone that has worked with us who was 41 years ago. It was right after the World Trade Towers fell, and he was 38 or 39 when it happened, and he had two best friends working in those towers that perished, who had young children like him. And he looked at me and said, I could never forgive myself with a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 2-year-old at home to not record my values and my beliefs and what I've learned in my life, so that they would know me. And he started at 41 and updated it since then. Of course, it's years later, but it's never too early.
And tell us, what do you think, what goes into an ethical will? What are the kinds of things, help me get a picture, because I'm hearing you say you're crafting these ethical wills through film and story, but how would you define them?
It comes from storytelling of one's life. One can find the values, the beliefs, the lessons learned, especially the wisdom that they accumulated, that they can share with loved ones. And we just help them craft it. I'm sort of trained to hold a mirror up when someone tells me their story and just say, is this what you mean? Is this an important value you hold? Is this something that you've had as a challenge that you've overcome in your life? And so it's a matter of doing the deep reflection of how you've lived your life. And most people live their life authentically, and I'm there to just bring out that authentic person.
Well, and it also sounds like you're creating a record, right? I mean, I think one of the hardest things is our memories sort of fade, and our accounts get a little fuzzy of what actually happened. But to give voice to someone's story from their actual voice, it's incredibly powerful. And, I think about how you link ethical will to, say, your values. Even if we go back to your first story about the grandfather's addiction and overcoming it, there's a whole set of values, right, associated that he's conveying now to his grandson. Maybe you can help us sort of, again, connect the dots between how values get sort of emphasized through the different stories.
Since the dawn of time, there have been fireside chats. Our ancestors have always passed on their wisdom and their values and their stories, through all types of cultures. It's happened. Recently, I worked with a Fortune 100 family where there were 5 sisters who looked at me. They were all ranging in age from 40 to 50 years of age. And they looked at me and said, I asked them, what would you like to learn about your dad or mom, but particularly their dad, that you don't know? And they said to me, we don't really understand whatever happened to Dad during the war years. He served in 1940s in World War II, and we just don't have any. He will never talk about it as soon as any of us ask. Could you please unpack that for us? So of course we go through our process and looking at his life review, and when we get to the part in his military service, he does open up. He does realize this is the time. And he tells that he was an admiral in the Navy off the coast of Japan, and he had to order his troops to kill hundreds of Japanese. And he said from that moment on, he changed. His whole life changed. His whole demeanor changed. And he became a very passive man, a very, very peaceful man, and a very quiet man. And that's the man that they grew up knowing, obviously. So when they learned this, it brought such a connection between their understanding of how they were raised and who they were raised by and who he really was and what kind of torment he kept through his life. It brought them so much closer together. It actually allowed them to move into much newer relationships all the way around, all 5 daughters, which was really special. But it's not just, Kirby, about capturing those stories and some of the lessons learned and the wisdom and the values. It is also about capturing the times. I've worked with a man who, when we did this premiere in a private screening room for his family, there were 26, we hired a screening room to premiere his movie. Right after the movie, his 8-year-old grandson comes running out and says, Grandpa, how come when you were 8 and your friend fell in the stream behind your farmhouse that you didn't use your cell phone to call your mom to help rescue him? So his grandpa winked at me and looked and said, this was 1936. There were no cell phones. We didn't even have a landline. And we had a party line, and I had to run to save his life. I mean, that child is an internet native, not an immigrant like we are. That child is a cellular native. We didn't grow up with cell phones, right, Kirby? So it's a whole new thing that you have to communicate to allow the next generations to understand, you know, the technology and the life and the times that people grew up in. So that's really important. The other option that people have is it's easy to find the values when you're sitting around the Thanksgiving table. And I'm always one to blog about this and remind my clients, don't forget, when you're all around Thanksgiving, put an iPhone down, put any kind of recording device, and start asking the elder in the room about their life and their times in those days, because those are little precious recordings. You don't need me on Zoom or with a full crew to record it. It can be done oneself at home.
Yeah, I think that's something I've really appreciated about you, is how accessible you're making this process to different individuals who either want to make it sort of a capstone of their life and wherever they are age-wise, and maybe can afford and want to do a premiere, but then also making it accessible to those that maybe don't have the means to, or quite honestly don't want to spend the expense and the time, because I think it's a yes, and it's about the outcome of what you create, but it's also what I'm hearing you say is the experience, right? The powerful experience that occurs through the process, that can open people's eyes. One quick story, I know I didn't preface this in our preparation, but I talked to somebody recently who was cleaning out his mother's house, and he had put it off for 5 years after her death and was just, you know, it was too emotional, too sad. But he said once he got in her house, and this was someone who, you know, first generation was in Germany, second generation came to the United States, and his mother was survived World War II. But we found out as he went through his house that she actually was working for the Allies during World War II. And as he was unpacking and decluttering her house, she had stashed all of these sort of things related to her past that she was afraid, even when she came to the US, for anyone to discover about how she was actually working as an informant. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, had she had the opportunity to unpack that part of her life that she kept so quiet, so private, so personal, because it was obviously traumatic, right? But it was obviously a major defining moment in her life to make a decision to say, hey, wait a minute, I'm gonna, you know, I'm German, but I'm gonna work for the other side. And I thought, wow, what a powerful gift that could have been, and just how important these messages are, you know, to give voice and to share from the person. I know personally you've had the opportunity to do some of this work. I mean, tell us what you've experienced. I'd love to hear more too.
Well, you hit the nail on the head, Kirby, as you always do, you brilliant woman, you. That defining moments is where we begin. And so we like to unpack this with looking at milestones, highlights, triumphs, and challenges throughout everyone's life. And once you unpack those, all those things come out. I had a case once where, again, it was a daughter who came to me who said, when you're on camera with my dad, could you find out why our family foundation gives $150,000 each year to juvenile diabetes? Because no one in the family has it. No one that I know of, none of my nieces, nephews, kids, nobody. So there we were on camera. And I say, I understand you're quite philanthropic, JD. And he turns to me, this stoic man, tears in his eyes, saying, when I was 3 in 1934, my mother lost my older brother to juvenile diabetes. I never met him because I was 3. He was born in 1931. And from that moment, my mother changed. As I was told when I was 17, he said she died of heart problems. Her sister said that her heart was never the same after she lost her first son. She was never the same woman. So at that age, he vowed to give up a certain percentage of his income every year to juvenile diabetes in honor of his mother. I'm going to get verklempt again. In honor of his mother, so that another mother might not have to suffer what she did. And he built an amazing, huge multinational business, and they give now millions of dollars to juvenile diabetes. And because once the family heard it, the daughter and the sons, they changed the bylaws of the family foundation to say that in perpetuity, they would always give that percentage to juvenile diabetes. How powerful is that? And I had no idea. My crew was crying, I was crying, the man was crying. I learned a lesson, big lesson. Do pre-production interviewing to understand every aspect of a secret or a, unfound treasure, like you just told, of knowledge that they have that they've never shared before. And when I asked him, how come nobody knows? He says, nobody's ever asked me.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's incredible. It's incredible what comes out in story when sometimes you least expect it. And I have to admit, I cringe because, when my dad was getting up in years, I begged, I pleaded, I said, please, please do this. And the response I got was, I'm not that interesting. Like, I don't have that much to share. But yet I would sit around the dinner table and I would hear these miraculous stories come out of his mouth, or my mother's mouth for that matter. And I would just sort of look at them quizzically, thinking, how do you not see that this is so fascinating to me, to my siblings, to our kids, to the kids that are yet to be born? And I think the real lesson I've learned is that it's never too late. I still beg my mom to share more of her stories. And I will sheepishly admit I've recorded her on more than one occasion when she hasn't been aware, because I know that I want my kids, when they're a little bit older, to appreciate the incredible life that she's lived and my dad lived.
Wow, that's a great inspirational story, Kirby. I know your heart's in the right place. That's fantastic. And don't worry if you do it secretly. One day you could just surprise her and tell her that you've done it secretly. And I think deep down, she'll be relieved, because she won't have done the whole camera thing maybe and been nervous about she just did it naturally with you and didn't know. So sometimes I don't tell the client I've pressed record already and they're just yakking away. Those are the best moments. They're really, but part of our skill is to get them to be authentic on camera from the moment one. And that's what, I've been told.
Well, Iris, you provide a tremendous gift for individuals who probably don't even necessarily want it for themselves as much as they know there's something important to share with others. I hope more families will find you and discover the power of creating an ethical will and capturing some of these milestones and important stories. And let's face it, we are unlocking, past successes, failures, and major life events that likely transfer a lot of important values and knowledge and experience to future generations. And at the end of the day, we need that continuity. We need to honor that heritage. We need to celebrate where we come from. And I can't think of any better way than to do it with an ethical will or a legacy video or something like that you create.
Mm-hmm. If I could just say, if you've ever seen the article in Esquire magazine a number of years ago, an interview of Robert De Niro, which was kind of an ethical will interview, they were looking at his regrets in his life. And he said that his biggest regret in his life was not recording his mom and dad before they passed about their journey from Italy to New York, that immigrant story. And he said it's his biggest regret. He lives every day, especially because he had the access to film crews and cameras and producers. He could have done it in a second, and he never got it for his kids. He knew the story in his heart, but he wanted his parents to tell it and didn't do it. Biggest regret. So there's something to be said. Robert De Niro has a lot of influence out there and still couldn't make it happen. So people shouldn't wait. People should not wait also, especially in our times now with COVID-19 the way it is. You just never know.
Yeah, well, I agree. And honestly, that's the other thing I love about how your practice is transformed. I mean, you're helping people real time right now do this. Sign up with Iris, because you can work through virtually and capture this and kind of be your own production filmmaker all yourself with all the great technology we have at our fingertips today. And so I would really encourage people to take a look at Memoirs Productions, see what work Iris is championing and how it might open some secrets, unlock some doors to your family, your past, and really just help bring you closer together. Because ultimately, that is what's so powerful. An experience like this is foundational family building. I mean, we can't do much deeper work that can help align families, get them on the same page, and quite honestly, heal a lot of wounds potentially that maybe you don't even know are there. And again, I can't thank you enough, Iris, for being with us today on the Tamarind Learning Podcast, where we want to showcase and work with and highlight the great work that our peers are doing in this space. So we'll hopefully you'll come back and share more.
Oh, I can. I have lots of things to help people learn what the transformation is through the process that we use. I have lots of more stories to share about that. So I'd be glad to come back if you'd like.
Love to. Okay. Thank you so much, Iris.
Thank you, Kirby, and keep up the fabulous educational work for this wonderful, wonderful group that you serve. They're lucky to have you.